In feudal Japan, there was a practice among samurai called shinitai, literally death body. Before entering battle, the samurai would undergo a meditation in which they visualized their own death in specific physical detail. The sword entering the body, the sensation of falling, the last breath. They didn't do this to become fearless. They did it to remove the one piece of leverage that combat holds over the mind, the unknown. A samurai who has already experienced his death in his imagination cannot be destabilized by the possibility of death in reality, because the possibility has been converted into a known quantity. The meditation didn't eliminate fear. It eliminated the destabilizing power of fear by making the worst outcome familiar. By the time the battle started, the samurai's nervous system had already processed the thing every opponent was hoping to threaten him with. There was nothing left to flinch at. That principle, pre-processing the threat until it loses its charge, is the foundation of everything this video is about, and it applies to every confrontation you'll ever walk into, not just the ones involving swords. Most people prepare for confrontations by rehearsing what they're going to say. That's the wrong preparation. You're building a script for a conversation that won't follow your script. The other person won't deliver their lines on cue. The moment they say something you didn't anticipate, the rehearsal collapses and you're left standing on nothing. Reacting instead of choosing, defending instead of directing, matching their energy instead of holding your own. Rehearsing words prepares you for a conversation. It doesn't prepare you for a confrontation. And the difference between those two things is the difference between exchanging ideas and having your foundation tested. The person who is genuinely unshakable in conflict didn't master a breathing technique or memorize power phrases. They completed 3 internal negotiations before entering the room. Negotiations that most people never start. And those 3 negotiations are the entire architecture of what it means to be unreachable during a confrontation. The first negotiation is with yourself about yourself. Before any confrontation, the person who cannot be shaken has already audited every true accusation the other person could make. Not the insults, the accurate observations, the things that are actually true about their flaws, their failures, their limitations. They've looked at each one and decided, is this something I'm working on or something I've accepted? Either answer works. What matters is that the question has been settled before someone else raises it. Machiavelli wrote that a prince should never leave to chance what can be decided by preparation. And the most dangerous thing you can leave to chance in a confrontation is an unexamined belief about yourself, because that's where the flinch lives. Every time someone shakes you with a single sentence, they haven't discovered something new about you. They've landed on something you already suspected but never settled. The accusation doesn't create the wound, it finds it, and the only defense is to find it first. The second negotiation is with the outcome. Before the confrontation, the unshakable person has already walked through the worst possible result. Not the likely one, the worst one. They lose the job. They lose the relationship. The room turns against them. The other person says the thing they're most afraid of hearing. And they've sat with each version until it stopped producing a physiological response. This is the samurai's death meditation applied to social conflict. A threat only works on someone who hasn't already absorbed the thing being threatened. Once you've pre-accepted the worst outcome, every lesser outcome becomes irrelevant, and the person making the threat is negotiating with someone who has nothing left to lose in the exchange. Machiavelli observed that the most dangerous man in any negotiation is the one who has already accepted the worst, because he cannot be moved by fear, only by reason. And most people in confrontations are wielding fear, not reason. Against a person who has pre-accepted the worst, the entire arsenal is empty. The third negotiation is the hardest, and the one almost nobody completes. It's the relocation of your identity from external perception to internal ground. Most people carry a portion of their sense of self in how others see them. Their competence, their likability, their moral standing, their authority. That portion is the target in every confrontation. If you need the other person to see you as competent, they'll question your competence. If you need to be liked, they'll withdraw approval. If you need respect, they'll perform contempt. People in confrontations instinctively aim at whatever the other person is protecting. And the only way to remove the target is to move it off the table entirely. To decide in advance that this person's perception of you is not where your identity lives. Machiavelli understood this better than any philosopher of power. He wrote that a prince who relies on the goodwill of others for his security has built on sand. The same applies to identity. A sense of self that depends on another person's assessment of you will always be vulnerable to anyone willing to attack that assessment. The unshakable person has moved their foundation to ground the other person cannot access. When all three negotiations are complete, the self-audit, the pre-acceptance, the identity relocation, something structural changes. The confrontation arrives and finds nothing to grip. The accusations land on examined ground and bounce. The threats point to outcomes already absorbed. The attacks on perception target something that's no longer stored where they're aiming. The person isn't performing composure. They are composed, the way a building is composed, architecturally, from the foundation up. This is why techniques fail. Breathing exercises, vocal control, power postures, surface interventions applied to a structural problem. The person running a composure technique during a confrontation is managing symptoms while the building shakes underneath. The moment the other person hits something the technique doesn't cover, it collapses and the flinch appears. You can't control a flinch in real time. You can only eliminate the conditions that produce it before you enter the room. Here's how this works practically. Before your next confrontation, the one you already know is coming, the one you've been rehearsing in the shower, stop rehearsing the conversation and start running the audit. What is the worst true thing this person could say about me? Sit with it until it's settled. What is the worst possible outcome of this exchange? Walk through it until the charge is gone. What do I need this person to think of me? And can I enter this room without that need? Answer those three questions honestly, and the confrontation changes before it starts. Not because you'll have better arguments, because you'll have nothing left to defend. And a person with nothing to defend is a person who can choose every word, hold every silence, and meet every escalation from a position the other person cannot reach. Machiavelli spent his career studying the difference between leaders who held power under pressure and leaders who crumbled. The difference was never courage or eloquence. It was the willingness to complete the internal negotiations most people avoid because the negotiations themselves are uncomfortable. Looking at your own flaws is uncomfortable. Accepting the worst outcome is uncomfortable. Detaching your identity from another person's perception is uncomfortable. But that discomfort, experienced before the confrontation, is the exact price of being unreachable during it. The samurai who practiced shinny-tai didn't walk into battle without fear. They walked in post-fear, having already moved through the worst their mind could generate. That's the state. Not fearless, post-threat. A person who has already absorbed every version of what the confrontation could produce, and found that none of them were enough to move them from where they stand. That's not a technique. That's a person who did the work before the room required it. And the room can feel the difference the moment they walk in.